Part 1. The Boy Who Walked Backward. They found Daniel's journal zipped inside his tent, bone dry despite the thunderstorm that had rolled through the Smokies that night. Every page was legible. The handwriting, clean and deliberate, ended mid-sentence. The boy, he was there again tonight. I heard him whispering, but he never faces me, always walking away, always backward. He knows my name now. No one knows what happened to Daniel Carr, a 31-year-old environmental educator and seasoned hiker with over a decade of experience on the Appalachian Trail. What we have are fragments, pages from his journal, audio clips from a handheld recorder, and photos he took near Clingman's Dome in Tennessee. Blurry, unsettling shots of empty forest paths, some with footprints in the dirt. Oddly placed, reversed. But if you read closely, if you listen between the lines, a picture begins to form. Not a clear one, never clear, but sharp enough to cut. Daniel wasn't the kind of guy who made things up. He taught high school students about black bears and salamanders. He volunteered for backcountry rescues. His friends described him as practical, grounded, almost frustratingly rational. And yet, something happened out there in March 2024 that changed him. Something that made him doubt his eyes, question his thoughts, and ultimately vanish. This is his story, or at least what's left of it. And once you hear it, you may never look at children on the trail the same way again. If you're into true, eerie wilderness encounters that mix mystery, fear, and the unexplained, hit that subscribe button to support this channel. Your support helps me keep digging up these unsettling stories that too many people want to forget. Daniel Carr arrived at Clingman's Dome trailhead on a fog-soaked Friday morning. He liked to hike alone in late winter when the crowds thinned out and the air still bit at your lungs. It was quiet season, his season. This wasn't just a getaway. He was testing new equipment for a wilderness education nonprofit. Solar chargers, GPS transponders, waterproof notepads. But if you read his notes carefully, that's not the full story. Daniel had been restless lately. His co-workers said he'd been distracted, haunted even. A breakup 6 months earlier had cracked something inside him. The trail, he believed, would set it right. He planned a 3-day solo loop through the Smokies, sleeping at shelters, collecting data, and clearing his head. It started normally. Photos of ridge lines and moss-covered logs, voice notes about birdsong and trail erosion. His first journal entry was calm, reflective, but that changed on the second day. March 14th, 2024. Entry 2. Saw a kid on the trail today, maybe 10, maybe younger, just standing in the middle of the switchback. He didn't look scared, but he wasn't hiking either. He didn't say anything. He didn't wave. He just turned around, very slowly, and walked backward into the woods. I thought it was a game. Maybe his parents were nearby. I waited, but no one came. Daniel followed the boy's prints for a while, thinking he might lead him to a family. The trail grew narrower, more overgrown. The prints were unmistakable, small, heel first, reverse direction. Walking away, but facing him, always facing him. He turned back when the fog thickened. That night, he made camp near Mount Buckley, not far from the ridge. The temperature dropped below freezing, and he recorded a short voice note before bed. I keep thinking about that kid. Something about the way he moved. It wasn't playful, it was too careful, too deliberate. The next entry is shorter, more clipped, and Daniel's tone changes. March 15th, entry 3. He was at my campsite. I didn't hear him come up, just turned around and saw him, standing there, still facing away, still walking backward, closer this time. I spoke to him, but he didn't respond. When I stepped toward him, he stepped back, deeper into the woods. Every time I moved, he mirrored me, but always walking in reverse. I got chills, not from the cold, Daniel didn't sleep that night. According to the journal, he heard movement around his tent, like leaves being dragged in slow circles. When he opened the zipper to check, there were small barefoot prints all around his tent, facing away but spaced like someone had been standing still. He didn't take a photo, or if he did, it wasn't on the SD card recovered with his gear. The next morning, he packed early, changed his route. He left the AT and took a lesser-used connector trail that looped back toward Newfound Gap Road. He was supposed to be out another night, but something had shifted in him. His journal reflects that. His handwriting, once neat and wide-spaced, became smaller, tighter, almost like he was whispering through ink. The March 16th, entry 4. I haven't seen anyone all morning. No hikers, no wildlife, just quiet. Too quiet. I passed a register at the shelter. No names in it for the last 3 days. Not even mine. I swore I signed it on the first night. I remember writing my full name. But the page was blank. I signed it again. Checked twice. I'll check again tomorrow. Later that day, he stopped near an overlook. He took a picture. Fog-drenched forest. Gray light filtering through the bare branches. In the far corner of the frame, barely visible, a figure stands among the trees. Too small to be an adult. Feet turned unnaturally outward. The metadata on the photo says it was taken at 3:14 p.m. At 3:22 p.m., he recorded one last audio note. Audio log, 3:22 p.m., March 16th. Okay, I don't know if this is still working. I just want to document this. I sat down to eat, heard laughter behind me. Not like a kid laughing, more like a whisper that's trying to sound like laughter. The boy was there again, but not alone. I counted 3, maybe 4, all walking backward, forming a circle, just outside my vision. Every time I turn, they scatter, but never forward, never toward me. I think they're trying to herd me, not sure where. I need to move. That's the last verifiable communication from Daniel Carr. He was reported missing on March 18th when he failed to check in with his field office. A search and rescue team located his tent 2 days later. The tent was zipped from the inside. His gear was neatly packed. His pack was full. No signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks. At least not human. But 17 yards from the tent, in a damp patch of moss, were dozens of tiny, reverse-facing, barefoot prints, radiating outward like a burst. Some were overlapping, some were deeper than others, as if someone had stood there for a very long time. No DNA, no confirmed sightings, no leads. Daniel's disappearance was ruled inconclusive. Park authorities suggested he became disoriented and wandered off trail, despite the fact that no scent trail was found beyond that spot. But his journal tells a different story, especially the last line he wrote, the one that trails off mid-thought. They don't blink, they don't speak, but they know the trail better than me. They've been here long. The boy, he was here again tonight. And there's a trail legend in those parts, not one the rangers share on guided tours. It comes from Cherokee oral tradition, passed down, whispered more than spoken. The legend of the Gi-U-Na-Li, the ones who walk backward, spirits of children lost too young, too violently, who never learned to face the world. They lure hikers off the path by mimicking innocence, leading them deeper and deeper until they forget which way they were going. The footprints they leave never point forward, because they're not trying to get somewhere, they're trying to lead you away. Of course, it's just a story, right? But hikers have reported strange sightings near Klingman's Dome for decades. A child standing in the fog, footprints appearing overnight, the soft echo of laughter when no one's around. No one ever gets a clear look. No one ever gets close. And those who do, usually don't come back. Maybe Daniel's journal was a fabrication. Maybe he hit his head, suffered hypothermia, and wandered off trail. Or maybe the truth is exactly what he wrote, that some children never really leave the woods. They just forget how to move forward. And when they find someone walking alone, someone wounded by heartbreak or doubt, they reach out, not with hands, but with backward steps and quiet invitations. Come with us. Just turn around. We'll show you the way. If this story chilled you, disturbed you, or made you think twice about your next solo hike, support the channel by subscribing. Your voice helps me keep digging into the strange, true, and terrifying stories hiding in America's wild places. And stay tuned, because the next story, it's even worse. Part 2, Fire by the River. The river had always been her place of healing. Even as a child, Melissa couldn't explain it. Something about the constant motion of water made the noise in her mind go quiet. After the past year, after him, she needed that silence more than ever. She parked near Harper's Ferry, shouldering a brand new pack with tags she hadn't bothered to cut off. This was her first solo hike, a 3-day loop that would trace the Appalachian Trail southward before curving along the Shenandoah River. The air had that late spring shimmer, cool in the morning but promising sweat by noon. Perfect weather for walking toward peace. She told herself she was here to move on, but somewhere deep down she was here to disappear. Her friends had begged her to wait, to hike with a group, or at least bring someone. But Melissa needed to prove something, to herself, to the voice in her head that still sounded too much like her ex, the one who'd said she wasn't strong enough, not resilient enough, not worth the time it would take to fix. He hadn't said it all at once. It had come slowly, in pieces, like the way a river doesn't flood in an instant, but rises inch by inch until suddenly the banks are gone and everything is underwater. The first day on trail was smooth. She passed a couple day hikers, nodded politely, kept moving. The trees were budding with that almost translucent green, the kind that made everything feel alive and forgiving. Melissa stopped for lunch near a cluster of boulders overlooking the river. She took out her notebook, drew the water, wrote a line of poetry she wouldn't show anyone. It felt like breathing again. That night she set up camp near a wide bend in the river, flat ground, not far from a blue-blazed side trail. There was no one else in sight. She boiled water for pasta and sipped red wine from a collapsible silicone cup. She fell asleep with the sound of the current in her ears. At 2:14 a.m., she woke up to music, faint, drifting through the trees, a guitar or maybe a banjo, just a few chords repeating in a slow rhythm, a crackling fire, laughter. It wasn't threatening. In fact, it was inviting. She unzipped her tent, poked her head out. Orange light flickered deeper in the woods, maybe 50 yards away. Movement, silhouettes slow and dancing. Someone was having a late-night campfire, maybe a thru-hiker crew. She hesitated. Common sense whispered stay put, but something else pulled her. Loneliness, curiosity, that half glass of wine from earlier. She grabbed her jacket and headlamp, leaving her gear inside the tent. She followed the light, stepping carefully between roots, past an ancient oak that split into two like antlers against the sky. As she got closer, the music sharpened, a low hum of voices singing. The smell of pine smoke wrapped around her like a memory. Then she saw them. 6 people sat around a stone-ringed fire, their clothes ragged in a kind of charming way, patched jackets, wool blankets, hats pulled low. One of them strummed a stringed instrument Melissa couldn't identify. It looked handmade, like something carved from driftwood. The flames danced orange against their faces. When she stepped into the light, they looked up and smiled, not startled, not surprised. "Evening," one of them said, a woman with ash-gray braids and eyes like glass marbles. "Hope you don't mind," Melissa said, suddenly self-conscious. "I heard music and—" "Of course," said another, a man whose voice sounded like it hadn't been used in years. "There's always room by the fire." Melissa stood frozen for a second. Something about them didn't feel modern. No phones, no headlamps. Their gear didn't look REI approved, but there was nothing threatening in their faces, just warmth. So she sat. Someone handed her a tin mug of something sweet and smoky. Another offered a piece of hard bread with a slice of pale cheese. "What brings you out alone?" the gray-braided woman asked. "Trying to clear my head," Melissa said. "Get away from things." They nodded in unison, like they already knew. She stayed for maybe an hour, talked about hiking, art, music. They told stories that sounded half folklore, half truth. A man named Josiah described watching the river freeze solid in 41. A younger woman with a scarf around her face said she once walked from Georgia to Maine without speaking a single word. Eventually, the music faded. The fire dimmed. One by one, the group leaned back or curled up in wool blankets, drifting toward sleep like ships slipping downriver. Melissa stood, whispered a quiet thank you. No one stirred. She walked back to camp, half dreaming. She didn't fully wake until the morning sun sliced into her tent. Melissa rubbed her eyes. Her jacket smelled like smoke. Her lips tasted faintly of that strange, sweet liquor. She stepped outside to brush her teeth, thinking maybe she'd return the way she came and hike out early. The river seemed quieter today, flat and gray. She paused. Where had the fire been? She walked back toward the oak tree, retracing her steps. No trail, no voices, no ring of stones, no footprints. But there, in a clearing where she thought she'd sat last night, was a blackened circle of ash and 6 pairs of shoes, perfectly arranged in a ring around the soot. The shoes were old, worn, melted in places. One had moss growing on it. Another was missing a sole. All of them were empty. Melissa stared for several seconds, then backed away. She returned to camp, packed up, and started hiking toward Harper's Ferry. That should have been the end of it. But the music came back the next night, this time from her backpack. She was staying at a small hostel in town, tucked behind a bookstore. Her phone was off. No one else was in the bunk room. At 1 a.m., the soft strumming started again. She unzipped her pack. At the bottom, buried under clothes and trail mix, was a harmonica. It looked ancient, scratched and dented, like it had been played by 100 mouths. She didn't own a harmonica. Over the next week, strange things began to happen. Her map had scribbles on it she didn't remember making, notations along the river. They sleep by water, and the old bend is watching. A hand-drawn star marked a place labeled the Drowned Camp. Her voice memos had distorted clips, her own voice muttering things she didn't remember saying. In one, she whispered, "Don't trust the ones who stay warm in the rain." Melissa visited a local outfitter to replace her filter. The clerk, a college-age girl with too many enamel pins on her vest, stopped mid-transaction. "Where'd you get this?" she asked, holding up the harmonica Melissa had placed on the counter. I don't know." The girl frowned. "Looks just like the one that went missing. Belonged to a guy named Jamie. He went missing last spring." Melissa's stomach flipped. "Where?" she asked. "Same area. Just south of here." Riverbend. Melissa left without her filter. That night, she dreamed of firelight and singing. She dreamed of sitting barefoot in the ashes. And in the dream, she wasn't the guest anymore. Determined to understand what happened, Melissa returned to the trail, not to hike, but to follow the truth. She checked ranger stations, interviewed shop owners, and left messages in hiker registries. A few recalled hearing about the Fire Singers, a nickname for a group of alleged ghost hikers who welcomed strangers and were never seen again. Most laughed it off, but one man didn't. He was in his 60s, working a roadside stand, selling apples and boiled peanuts. "You met them," he said when she described her night by the fire. "How do you know?" He pointed to her wrist. She hadn't noticed it before. A faint ash mark, like soot or charcoal, ringed her skin just above the pulse. A perfect circle. "I got the same one." 30 years ago, he said, pulling back his sleeve to show a faded ring, scarred but still visible. "What does it mean?" He looked out at the trees. "It means they like you." Melissa now speaks at trail safety events. She doesn't tell the full story, not the harmonica, not the dreams, but she tells hikers to trust their instincts. She tells them that not everything warm is safe. Not every fire is for you. Sometimes, she says, you're being invited to stay forever, and once you sit down, once you accept the mug, you become part of the circle. She never played the harmonica. She burned it in a fire behind her apartment. But some nights she still hears the notes, faint, familiar, drifting in through the open window. And once, just once, she woke to find 6 pairs of shoes outside her door, soaking wet, arranged in a ring. She lives on the 3rd floor. If you're still with me, thank you. Stories like Melissa's don't come with neat endings. That's the nature of the trail. Sometimes you leave things behind. Sometimes they follow you home. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Raw, real, and strange enough to keep you up at night. And if you've ever heard music where there should be none, maybe don't follow it. In part 3, we'll hear from Trevor, a trail runner whose fastest time couldn't outrun the man in the mirrorless van. You won't want to miss that one. Part 3. The man in the mirrorless van. Trevor had always believed in preparation. He was the type of man who trained for marathons while on vacation, who laminated his maps, who color-coded his gear. Hiking wasn't just a hobby, it was ritual. His trail name, Meter, came from his habit of tracking every mile, calorie, and heartbeat with relentless precision. So when he decided to attempt a solo fast-pack section along the Appalachian Trail near Roan Mountain, no one doubted he'd crush it. 45 miles in under 2 days. A challenge, yes, but nothing beyond his limits. He had the strength. He had the plan. What he didn't have, what no spreadsheet could account for, was the man in the mirrorless van. And it started the way most strange things do. Small, forgettable, a blur at the edge of routine. Day 1, mile 12. Trevor passed Carver's Gap just after noon, powering uphill with rhythmic strides and a loaded pack cut to 19 pounds. At the overlook, he stopped to refill water from his soft flask and noticed a white van parked at the gravel pull-off below. No big deal. Plenty of people parked along the AT. But something about this van stuck with him. Not the make, not the model, but what was missing. No mirrors, not the side mirrors, not the rear view. Trevor squinted, thought maybe they were folded in, but as he adjusted his angle, he confirmed it. The van had no reflective surfaces whatsoever, not a scratch, not a plate shine. It was matte white, as featureless as a stone. He told himself it was nothing, a weird mod, maybe a delivery vehicle. He moved on, but then he saw it again and again. And that night, Trevor camped at a stealth spot just off the AT, halfway between Roan High Knob and Ash Gap. He filtered water from a stream and cooked a dehydrated curry meal on his alcohol stove. He messaged his sister back home via satellite tracker. All good, pushing hard, on pace. He didn't mention the van. It would have sounded ridiculous. But as he brushed his teeth, headlamp on low, he caught a flicker of white through the trees. Stationary, just beyond the rise. He killed his light, heart ticking up. When he stepped toward the ridge, it was gone. But the second day was harder. Fog rolled in over the balds, turning everything into wet ghosts. His shoes were soaked by 9 a.m. He slipped twice on the mossy rocks near Grassy Ridge. By noon, his knees ached, and he'd fallen behind schedule. That's when he heard the engine, low, idling, somewhere just out of view. Trevor hustled downhill toward the next trailhead, hoping for dry socks and maybe a conversation with a local. But when he rounded the last switchback, the gravel lot was empty, except for the same white van. Still no mirrors. A man stood leaning against the driver's door, tall, mid-40s, plain baseball cap, sunglasses, too still. Trevor's first instinct was to nod, keep walking, but the man smiled slow and easy. "Long haul today, huh?" Trevor hesitated. "Yeah, Roan's always a beast." "You camping out again?" the man asked. Trevor blinked. "How'd you know I camped last night?" The man tilted his head. "Don't all you fast packers stealth it?" It was a clever dodge, but Trevor's gut clenched. He wasn't wearing his GPS tracker on the shoulder strap anymore. He'd clipped it to his back hip, out of sight. The man stepped toward the back of the van and opened the trunk. Inside, a cooler, trail snacks, water jugs. "Want a Gatorade?" he asked. Trevor shook his head. "Appreciate it, but I'm good." "You sure?" He pulled out a bottle. "Orange, still cold." It was sealed, condensation running down the sides. Harmless. But Trevor noticed something subtle. There was no gear in the van, no clothes, no bedding, not even a wrapper. Just the cooler, like the entire vehicle existed only to show up in parking lots. He declined again, more firmly this time, and walked on. The man didn't follow, but Trevor had the undeniable feeling of being watched. He texted his sister again that night. "Anyone ever heard of a guy in a mirrorless van? Weird vibe. Keeps showing up." She replied, "Creepy. Be careful. Call me if he talks to you again." He didn't. That night, Trevor woke to a clicking noise near his tent. Not animal, not wind, mechanical, like plastic against plastic. He held his breath. Through the mesh, he saw a light, brief and blue like a camera screen flickering, then footsteps. Human, moving around his camp in a slow arc. He stayed frozen for nearly an hour. When the sound faded, he emerged. Nothing, just the fog and his own breath. But the next morning he found something wedged in the crook of a tree, 15 feet from his tent. A GoPro, still recording. He played it back. Hours of forest. Then a blurry figure. A man, standing, motionless, watching the tent from a distance, not moving, not approaching, just recording. Trevor shut it off, took out the battery, kept the camera. He didn't know what else to do. By noon, the rain started again, thick and relentless. Trevor pressed harder, desperate to finish early, to find a hostel, get off the trail. As he neared the next trailhead, his phone buzzed. No signal, but somehow a notification popped up. "Shared location update, Mirrorless Van 01 is nearby." His blood turned to ice. He hadn't accepted any shared locations. He hadn't turned on Bluetooth. He didn't know anyone with that username. The signal dropped out before he could screenshot it. He ran the last half mile. The van was waiting. Trevor ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. He couldn't see the man this time, just the vehicle, parked sideways across the gravel like a blockade. He considered turning back, but the idea of sleeping another night in the woods while being hunted like prey made his skin crawl. He skirted the far edge of the lot, keeping to the brush. When he emerged near the trail register, he spotted something scrawled in the notebook. Meter, 6.3 miles per hour. Slowing, noon ETA, see you again. Trevor hadn't signed in. He hadn't touched the register. No one should have known his trail name. No one should have known his pace, except him. He took off down the road, jogging until he hit a general store half a mile away, called the sheriff, waited. Deputies arrived, drove back up the road. No van, no man, nothing in the logbook. It had been torn out, cleanly, Trevor showed them the GoPro footage. The camera was empty, file wiped. They took a statement and told him to avoid solo hiking until they could follow up. They never called back. Trevor stayed in town that night, slept inside, door locked. But sometime around 3 a.m., he heard an engine hum beneath his window, and when he pulled back the curtain, he saw a white van idling across the street, just sitting, and in the reflection of the store glass behind it, there was nothing. No driver, no mirrors, no silhouette, just the van, watching. 2 weeks later, he stopped running. He told his sister he was taking a break from trails. He moved apartments, changed his phone, disabled GPS. But sometimes, walking home, he swears he hears that same engine, low, slow. Sometimes he gets texts with no number, just the words, "You're slowing. I'll adjust my pace. Mirrorless Van 01 has joined your route." The last time it happened, he crushed his phone under his boot. Trevor doesn't talk about it anymore, not much. But he posted one last thing on a private hiker forum, an encrypted thread that now sits archived, buried under gear reviews and weather alerts. It reads, "If you see the van, don't engage. Don't accept anything, don't talk. He tracks the fast ones, he likes the chase. But the mirrors, that's not a choice. That's because he's not watching you the way you think. He's watching what you leave behind." No one responded, but the post got 47 views. And then here's where things get even stranger. Remember Daniel from part 1, the wildlife biologist who vanished near Clingman's Dome? Trevor and Daniel were Facebook friends, both Appalachian Trail fanatics. They had hiked together once, years ago. Never close, just acquaintances. But one photo survived on Daniel's cloud account, backed up automatically. It's a blurry shot from a foggy overlook, and in the lower right-hand corner, barely visible in the trees, is the edge of a white van. No mirrors, no explanation, just a presence. If you made it this far, thank you for following another true story pulled from the misty edge of the Appalachian Trail. Stories like Trevor's aren't easy to tell, and they're even harder to prove. But just because something can't be verified doesn't mean it didn't happen. Subscribe to the channel to stay with us as we keep uncovering the strange, the forgotten, and the terrifying truths hidden in America's wilderness. In part 4, we follow Ariana, a mother of 2 who took a retreat into the Blood Mountain woods to find herself, only to discover that some trails don't loop back. Some trails never let you go. Part 4, The Lost Loop of Blood Mountain. They told Ariana the retreat would help her reconnect with nature, with her body, with her sense of self. What they didn't tell her was that she'd never walk the same again. She signed up for the Mindful Steps retreat 3 months after finalizing her divorce. 2 kids, 14 years of marriage, and a heart that hadn't just broken, it had vanished. Somewhere between the custody exchanges, the "you deserve better" texts, and the mirror she could no longer look into without seeing a stranger, Ariana lost herself. The retreat promised clarity, a reset, 4 days on the Appalachian Trail, women only, guided hikes, yoga at sunrise, no phones, no mirrors, no distractions. Blood Mountain wasn't far from where she lived in northern Georgia, but it might as well have been 1,000 miles away from her daily life of drop-offs, court orders, and microwave dinners. She wanted silence. She wanted stillness. She wanted to vanish just for a while. But she never expected the trail to vanish with her. There were 7 women in the group, plus a guide named Marla, a charismatic woman with a voice like warm tea and a tendency to speak in affirmations. They met at a trailhead parking lot and hiked slowly with lots of breaks and moments to breathe with the earth. The other women were friendly. Kara, a nurse recovering from burnout, Mona, a yoga teacher who'd lost her sister, and a few others whose stories Ariana never got to hear. It was peaceful, surreal even. The first night, they camped near a rock face with a view of the valley below. Ariana journaled by headlamp and watched the stars bleed into the horizon. Something inside her cracked open, but in a good way. For the first time in months, she cried and didn't feel weak for doing it. It was the second day that the trail changed. Marla suggested they split into smaller groups for the morning. Hike in pairs, walk in silence, let the mountain speak to you. Ariana partnered with Mona. They hiked together for about an hour until they reached a crooked tree near a fork in the path. The trail markers were faded. One arrow pointed left with a faint blue blaze. The other led uphill, less worn, unmarked. "I think we stay left," Mona said, checking her compass. "That's what Marla said last night." But Ariana, drawn to the stillness of the right fork, said, "What if we just loop around the other side? Meet them back at camp from a different angle?" Mona hesitated, then smiled. "We've got time." They turned right. The trail narrowed, then widened again. The forest changed subtly, less birdsong, fewer signs of hikers, no rappers, no prints, just trees that leaned slightly inward as if listening. They walked for another 40 minutes. Then Ariana realized something strange. They hadn't seen a single marker, no blazes, no mileage signs, nothing. She pulled out her map. No path matched the one they were on. Mona shrugged. "Let's keep going. It'll loop," but the loop never came. Instead, they reached a clearing where the trail disappeared altogether, swallowed by undergrowth and moss. The canopy above twisted, heavy with shadow, despite the midday sun. They turned back, but the trail behind them had changed. Where there'd been a slope, now there was a flat stretch. The crooked tree was gone. The brush was thicker. Still, they walked. Fast. After 20 minutes, Mona stopped cold. "This is the same log." I remember the fungus pattern Ariana looked. A half-rotted trunk, dotted with yellow caps like tiny saucers. They'd gone in a circle, but they hadn't turned. They walked again, choosing a new direction. Every step felt heavier. The second loop brought them back to the same log, only now there was something on top of it. A small wooden pendant shaped like an eye. Smooth, old, stained with something red. Ariana picked it up, then dropped it fast. It was warm, like it had just been held. Mona whispered, "We're not alone." Their water was running low. They tried turning around again, this time following the sun. But the forest played tricks. Branches realigned, shadows shifted. The silence was wrong. Not peaceful, but pressurized, like the moment before a scream. Then the forest changed again. They came upon a wide stretch of trail, freshly packed, almost too clean. Straight, unbending, unnatural. A long corridor flanked by trees that didn't sway, no wind, no birds. And ahead, barely visible, a figure, a woman standing still, facing away. She wore what looked like a gray hoodie. Mona called out. The woman didn't move. They approached slowly. Ariana's heartbeat outpaced her steps. Something in her chest screamed, "Don't." When they were close enough to see the woman's hair, dark, tangled, Mona said, "That's Marla." But it wasn't. The figure turned. It wasn't a woman. It wasn't anything at all. Just empty fabric, shaped like a person, hollow inside. The hood framed a face that didn't exist. Where the eyes should have been, two deep slashes. Where the mouth should have opened, a seam. The figure collapsed like a coat falling from a hanger, and when it hit the ground, it vanished. They ran. Ariana's legs throbbed, lungs burning. She didn't care about looping. She just wanted out. They didn't stop until they stumbled back into the clearing. Same moss, same trees, same crooked path to nowhere. Except now there were 7 wooden pendants, each shaped like an eye, arranged in a circle on the ground. Each pendant bore a name, One of them said, "Ariana." She screamed. Mona tried to throw the pendants, but they wouldn't move. They stuck to the ground like roots. Ariana pulled out her phone, still dead, no signal. Then Mona whispered, "Look." In the trees, barely visible, were faces, not people, impressions, eyes and mouths wide and silent, formed from bark and shadow, watching. They turned in every direction. The forest moved with them. Branches bent without wind. Roots twitched beneath the soil. The forest wasn't a place anymore. It was a presence. Ariana dropped to her knees. She thought of her kids, of their last phone call, of her son's voice when he asked, "Are you coming to my game next week?" Of her daughter's hands on her cheeks when she said, "You look sad, Mommy. I want you to look like yourself again." And in that moment something snapped inside her, not in defeat, in defiance. She stood. "No," she said to no one, or maybe to everything. "You don't get to keep me. Not like this." She grabbed Mona's hand and began walking, not back, not forward, just through, refusing the paths, breaking branches, carving her own line. For hours they walked, scraping skin, bleeding knees. No trail, just will, until finally they broke through and fell onto gravel, a road, a real paved road. The sun was setting. A pickup truck slowed to a stop. "You ladies all right?" the driver asked. Ariana collapsed in tears. Later, at the ranger station, they explained what happened. A team went out to search for the clearing, the pendants, the trail. Nothing. No signs of disturbance, no crooked tree, no impressions in bark. But Ariana didn't care. She was out. And she remembered. A week later, back home, she found something in her pack, tucked in her journal, a new page, written in handwriting that wasn't hers. "You walked your own way. Not many do, but now you always will." Below it, a symbol, a single eye drawn in red. Ariana still hikes. Not alone, not anymore. But sometimes, when the forest goes quiet, she feels the pressure again, the loop trying to find her, and she tells herself, "Keep moving, don't stop, don't follow, make your own trail," because some paths don't want you to finish, they want you to stay. And if this story reached you, if you've ever felt the woods pull you into something too big to explain, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep bringing these buried stories into the light. In Part 5, we'll walk with Ray, a veteran who went to the presidential range to find peace and discovered that sometimes the watchers aren't imagined. They're waiting. Part 5, Where the Owls Watch. There were 3 things Ray Carson knew for sure. First, war changes you, but the silence afterward can be worse. Second, no matter how far you run from yourself, your shadow always finds you. And third, the forest is never truly empty, not the way people think it is. Ray was 53, a retired Army communications officer turned ultralight backpacker. He'd hiked sections of the Appalachian Trail for years, working his way up and down the eastern spine in scattered bursts between PTSD therapy appointments and long silences he didn't know how to explain to his kids. He didn't talk much anymore, not because he couldn't, but because so few people understood the kind of quiet that follows when the noise inside you won't stop. And that's why he came to the presidential range, because here in the wide open balds and harsh winds, you didn't have to explain anything. You just moved forward, step by step, blister by blister, breath by breath. But on this hike, on this last trail, Ray would finally learn that some silences don't come from peace. They come from being watched. It started with the owls. He noticed the first one on his second day out from Crawford Notch. Perched high above a scraggy outcrop, it didn't hoot, didn't flinch, just stared, motionless, with those massive amber eyes. He waved a hand, chuckled to himself. "Hey, wise guy, you got any trail advice?" The owl didn't blink. Weird, but whatever. Wildlife encounters weren't uncommon, except he saw another one an hour later. Different tree, different ridge, same stare. Ray was the kind of man who didn't rattle easily, but on the third day, even he started to feel it, the sense of being tracked. The third owl appeared near Mount Eisenhower, this time sitting low, almost at eye level. It turned its head in a slow arc as Ray passed. Still no sound, just that unwavering gaze. By then, he'd stopped talking to them, because he'd realized they were never blinking. That night, the wind howled so hard it rocked his tent poles. Ray hunkered down in his bivy sack and clutched his down quilt close. Somewhere in the trees, something cracked. Not a branch falling, something heavier. He told himself it was a moose, but he didn't sleep. At 3:47 a.m., he opened his eyes to a shape above his tent. Perched on a branch just beyond the mesh, a silhouette with two glowing eyes. An owl. Still. But when he flicked on his headlamp, it didn't fly away. It leaned closer, pressed its face toward the light. And Ray swore to God, just for a second, that one of the eyes wasn't an owl's eye at all. It was human. The next morning, he tried to brush it off. PTSD, maybe. A dream. He'd seen things before, especially after deployments. But what shook him more wasn't the owl. It was the pages missing from his field journal, ripped clean from the spiral binding, not torn in a panic, neatly removed. And on the inside of his tent, drawn in charcoal, was a single symbol, an eye, open wide, surrounded by wings. He didn't draw it. No one else had been there, at least, no one he saw. Ray pushed harder the next day, covering 16 miles in rough terrain to get off the ridge. He didn't stop to eat, barely drank. He just moved. But every mile the owls followed. He counted 7 by late afternoon, always silent, always watching, and then, as the sun dipped below the granite peaks, he heard something new. Voices, faint, repeating. He stopped, pulled off his pack, cupped his ear. It wasn't coming from ahead or behind. It was coming from above. Ray turned his face to the rocks and trees above the switchback, and high on the ridge, silhouetted against the dying light, a line of figures still, silent, watching, 10, maybe 12. He couldn't make out faces, but every single one of them wore something over their head, something feathery, like owl masks. Ray didn't run, not yet. He packed his things with shaking hands and kept moving, but now every breath felt thick, like the air was listening. As he descended toward Osgood, he felt a new sensation, not fear exactly, but recognition. Something about their posture, their quiet, their patience. He knew that kind of stillness. He'd seen it on sniper teams, on recon missions, people trained to observe, to wait. He thought of the ranger from Part 1, the one Daniel had talked to near Fontana Dam, the one who said, "You're not the first person to see her." Were there more of them? Were the watchers connected? What if this trail wasn't just haunted? What if it was being managed? Not by humans, not by anything official, but by something older. At camp that night, Ray did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. He didn't ask for rescue. He didn't beg for safety. He just whispered, "I see you, and I'm not here to take anything from you." The wind answered, and it sounded like feathers. The final day, Ray was different. He hiked slower, looked over his shoulder more often, and that's when he noticed the last thing. Every time he looked back, every time, his footprints had disappeared. The trail behind him remained untouched, virgin earth. He tested it, took 10 paces, turned around. Nothing. No compression, no prints, no trace. It was like the trail was erasing him as he moved, like he was being unwritten. Ray made it to the trailhead just before sunset. When he reached his car, he stared at his reflection in the window, and he didn't recognize the man looking back. Not just age, something more, something missing. And when he got home, he found his house unchanged, but in his pack, tucked where he always kept his emergency satellite beacon, was a new item, a feather, dark, speckled, and carved into the plastic case of the beacon in tiny, perfect letters, "We see what you leave behind." Ray doesn't talk about it, but he no longer hikes alone. He covers his mirrors now, sleeps with a white noise machine, because silence no longer feels safe. And once, last fall, while walking his daughter to school, they passed a tree with an owl perched low on a branch. She pointed and said, "Daddy, why is that man wearing a bird face?" Ray didn't look. He just told her, "Let's keep walking." The watchers don't need to follow you. They only need you to notice them once. After that, they never truly leave. If this series has moved you, if these stories found their way under your skin, subscribe to the channel, because some of these tales are based on whispers I've collected from real hikers. Some are harder to trace, but all of them, they come from the same place, from that thin line between the world we know and the one watching us back. Thanks for walking with me. We'll see you in the next nightmare.